All right. Sorry about that, folks. Hold on. Let me get myself situated here. I'm a little discombobulated. All right. Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions have been put on hold for a bit, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to season 2 of Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. If you're a fan of crime, noir, and mystery, you're in for a real treat. Tonight with us is Max Allan Collins, a multiple USA Today and New York Times bestselling author and award-nominated playwright. In 2017, he was named the Grand Master by the Mystery Writers of America and has earned 23 Private Eye Writers of America Seamus nominations, winning for his Nathan Heller novels True Detective and Stolen Away, and his short story So Long Chief with Mickey Spillane. He's written tie-in novels for CSI, Saving Private Ryan, Air Force One, and American Gangster. His Quarry novels were recently adapted as a critically acclaimed TV series by Cinemax, and his graphic novel Road to Perdition became one of my all-time favorites, the Academy Award-winning movie with Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, and a pre-James Bond Daniel Craig. Welcome, Max.
Hey, Russ, how are you?
I'm doing great. So glad to have you here. This is fantastic. So just a quick heads up to everyone at home. If you have any questions or comments for Max, feel free to send them in the chat box, and we'll get to them towards the end of the show. All right, Max. So let's jump in. So where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Muscatine, Iowa, and I'm sitting in Muscatine, Iowa right now.
Okay, local boy, stayed home.
That's right.
So was it just you, brothers, sisters? What was your family like?
I'm an only child. My dad was initially a music teacher, a high school music teacher for about 10 years, and then became an executive with Hahn Industries, which is an office furniture company. But he continued to direct the male chorus. And so he was involved in music and the arts. He was an interesting guy because he went to school on a split scholarship, basketball and music. So he was a sports guy and an arts guy, which is really unusual. So that was an interesting part of my background. My mom would take me to movies all the time as a kid and read to me, read Tarzan stuff to me when I was 4 or 5 years old.
The Pulp.
And got me interested in comic books before I could even read. So I had a good, nurturing, artistic family. And the fact that my dad was a high school teacher, we had a lot of high school kids in the house. And so I got to hang around with those older kids. And that was, I think, kind of inspiring.
Huh. So your dad was a sports and music and arts guy, and your mom took you to the movies. So we know the movies, obviously, and into comic books had an impact. What about music? Do you play? Did you get into music too?
Oh yeah, that's I don't know if I go so far as to call it my other profession, although there was a period of about 3-4 years where I did make a living at it, but I started playing rock and roll.
Really?
Yeah, I started playing rock and roll in about 1965. A band I started in 66 called the Daybreakers. We had one national record out, which is
get out.
Yeah, which is kind of infamous. It's called Psychedelic Siren. And if you look it up on YouTube, not only are we there when we regrouped to play for the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame about 10 years ago, when we got into the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, right.
There's 3 or 4 bands from around the world who've covered the song. It's kind of a punk, early proto-punk anthem. And, we can be found on one of the Sundazed Records, Garage Band Punk, albums. And it's actually out there quite a bit.
So what was your so musically? Were you more of a rock guy, a punk guy? Were you an eclectic mix of stuff? Like, what were your influences?
Well, 66, 65, that's still the British invasion. So I'm very much somebody who got into it because of the Beatles. We at one time, Muscatine's a town of less than 30,000, and we had 37 bands in the town at that time, combos.
Oh, geez.
So do the math, and how many jobs we all had to chase, how many proms and sock hops we were chasing. So
I did the teen rock band thing also.
Yeah. But I did, I never stopped. My band then years later turned into a band called Cruisin', which was arguably the first 60s revival band. And because we did it in, I think, 74, when the 60s were only 5 years before, and we were already a 60s revival band. So we're still around in a slightly different form. We've had, I don't know, probably 30 different people flow through that band since 1974. And we've done some recording, and I had every summer into the early fall, I've been still playing.
And you played
this
keyboard,
year.
right? Keyboard,
Yeah,
right? You said?
player, and usually the singer.
And the singer. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so do you still listen to music? Is that still part of your life?
Absolutely. Really, and I'm very I like a lot of different kinds of stuff, but I really like the 60s, and I really like new age music, the early 80s music.
Yeah, for sure.
Elvis Costello, Blondie, and all that stuff.
Oh, my favorite.
I recently got back into laser discs, which I loved at the time.
Yeah.
And then I got this kind of, I don't know, I got a bug about getting a CRT where I could play the lasers, because I had all these lasers and no way to play them. And I got a good laser disc player, and you have to have a tube TV. It's like with gaming. You really need a tube TV to use certain kinds of physical media.
Right.
And so I have been getting a ton of, and I had some already, of laser discs of, bands from the new wave era. And I just love seeing that, the stuff that just doesn't exist in any other form. Yeah. They never came out on DVD or on Blu-ray. So the only way you can see these things, a Yardbirds, a Yardbirds laser disc.
Wow.
Stuff like that. I mean, just, so I love that stuff, and Elvis Costello, and I think of more recent bands, not that they're super recent, right, but a big Weezer fan. And my son, who is now must be 37, but when he was in high school, he was into Weezer, and I actually accompanied him. I was like because they wanted to drive 300 miles to see Weezer. I forget where it was. So I drove them, and then I sat in the balcony, just bored to tears. And then Weezer came on, and I sat up and wait a minute. I remember this. This is rock and roll.
Yeah.
And I loved it, and I still do. They're probably my favorite band right now. So I still have that. I still have that spirit. But I like a lot of stuff. I like a lot of, I write a lot of historical stuff, set in 30s and 40s and 50s. So I guess the Great American Songbook is something I really like. So my all-time favorite artist is Bobby Darin, who had his feet in he was in every genre. He comes out as a rock and roller with Splish Splash and Dream Lover. Then he does, at like age 23, he does Mac the Knife. Whenever you hear him doing Mac the Knife on the radio or something, that's a 23-year-old.
Yeah,
that's mind-boggling to me.
Right.
And so, and then he was a pioneer in country rock. Roger McGuinn was a backup player of his before he got into the Byrds. Yeah. So I'm interested in a lot of different kinds of things. Show music. I'm a straight guy that loves show music. And it's I think if it's good, why not like it?
So since you're also a movie guy, taking a guess that you like movies like American Graffiti, American Hot Wax.
American Graffiti actually inspired us to start cruising, and because when we did cruising, we not only did 60s, we did 50s stuff.
Right. Yeah,
you would have to go out and there would be an audience for that, and when at that period, I didn't like the music very much. It was mostly disco, and it was not anything I was interested in playing. So we had broken up about 3 years before the band, and I went to my guy who I played in all the bands with, and I said, did you see American Graffiti? He said, oh yeah, all that great music. I said, why don't we I hate all the music that's out. Why don't we just get out the old song list and call it nostalgia? And so we just got our old song list out and mostly put the band back together, called ourselves Cruisin', and we were really pretty big there for about 5 years.
Wow!
And then we still play. I'm
going to throw a song out to you and tell me if it rings a bell, because it wasn't. You ask the average person, they would have no idea about it.
I don't guarantee anything.
Okay, it was actually from Del Shannon, Midtown American Main Street Gang. If you remember that.
Yeah, we opened for Del Shannon.
Get out! You did not.
We did.
Oh no, where?
We did. That was in Iowa City at, I remember the name of the place. It was upstairs, Crow's Nest, I think it was
Crow's
called.
Nest. Wow.
Yeah, we opened for in the 60s with the
Yeah.
Daybreakers. We opened for the Rascals. We opened for Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. We opened for the Buckinghams. We opened for Strawberry Alarm Clock. Then as Cruisin', when we're doing, you know, the retro stuff, and we would open for like Flo and Eddie, the Turtles. Played with the Grassroots several times. Played with Herman of Herman's Hermits. You know, what's his name? Such a great guy.
Wow. Oh, Max, you have this whole other life I knew nothing about.
Yeah,
Wow.
you know, I'm a big, but it killed me this year not to be able to, because even though I'm an old man, I wanted to. We had 8 gigs lined up, and we had to cancel them all. So maybe next summer, maybe we can. I want to do one more CD before I'm gone. I want to do. My ambition is in music is to do one of the best albums that could have been released in 1965.
All right. Well, I want a copy when you do it.
You bet.
All right. So let's sort of let's segue back a little bit. So you're a kid. Sure. Your mom read you Tarzan. She took you to the movies. When did you really first discover crime, noir, pulp? Like, what was your bread and butter?
I think it was my mother's fault, because she, when she'd been in San Diego during the war, when my dad was in the Navy, and she had access to a newspaper that had Dick Tracy in it, and she liked Dick Tracy. So when I started reading comics at age 5 or 6, if you can imagine, you know what Dick Tracy's like, with the bullets flying and the you know, blood and gore. She encourages me to buy Dick Tracy comics when I'm like 6 or 7 years old, so that she can read them to me, or she can read them also. And so I got into Dick Tracy at this very, very young age. And then I started reading, you know, Sherlock Holmes, and I liked The Saint. I'd seen some of the movies on TV. The show wasn't on yet. This is pre-Roger Moore. So I got interested in that stuff.
And I'm sorry, and your dad was in he was in the Navy, you said?
He was in the Navy, yeah.
Or how was he absent from your life for a while?
Oh, I wasn't born yet.
Oh, you weren't born yet. Okay.
No, 48. I'm a baby boomer.
Gotcha.
And no, he served in the Pacific. I wrote a book based on his experiences called USS Powder Keg, because he was one of us, a very small group of white officers who had a black crew, all African American crew,
really,
who were loading ammunition.
Right.
Because guess who they wanted to get to load all the ammunition? Right. You know, if you're going to blow people up, right, and it's 1943, let's get these guys in here. Right. And my dad was one of, I think, the four white officers, and he had incredible experiences. Wow. And it was very eye-opening, because he encountered things as a guy from Iowa himself. He was from Grand Junction, Iowa. Right. And he would find out that they were giving them, you know, the black crew was getting subpar meat, or were not getting the shoes or equipment that they needed. And he went to bat for them, and I've always admired him for that. Wow. And that's some of what's in that particular book.
So your dad, I mean, a lot of you know, former military, or, you know, when they're in combat, they're reluctant kind of to talk about their experiences. Your dad was fairly open with you about this stuff?
Yeah, he was very open about it. And, you know, he was in the Pacific, but he didn't see anything really approaching combat. I mean, there were some Jap Zeros that flew over, and they had some tense moments, but basically they're loading ammunition. So they're not shooting ammunition.
Oh, I see.
But they were a target, which is dangerous.
So, wow. So your dad, former, you know, military, your mom, encouraging your parents kind of have an eclectic backgrounds, and, you know, especially even for the time, because, you know, not everyone's parents were so, you know, not everyone's parents would necessarily push their kids to be into that. Did you have other friends who were kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, for the day, you know, your fellow, you know, comic book nerd friends? Did you have those, or were you kind of off on your own?
Well, that was a different time. I
Yeah.
mean, I had friends. I was in sports a little bit myself,
Hmm.
not the degree my dad was, but I had friends who were in both sports and were in say music or drama or band. I was in band and music and drama, and in high school I was in you know, played King Arthur and Camelot, played Henry Higgins and My Fair Lady, and loved that kind of performing, which then kind of moved into rock and roll. In junior high, I wrote a couple of plays that were musicals. I didn't write the music. We used popular music in them, but I always had an impulse toward performance, toward writing, toward storytelling. And my friends knew that and were very, interested and cool with it. But I'm one of the fun things I think you'll appreciate is that when I was in, I think the 7th grade, I did I did a comic book, hand-drawn pencil comic book, stapled, called Psycho Ward, that was like a Mad Magazine takeoff.
Yeah.
And I had one copy, which I would take to school and pass around. And then I take it like in the morning in the homeroom and I give it to somebody, and then it'd pass around the school. And then at the end of the day, I'd get it back. And then the next week I do another one. I did that. I don't know. I did that for a long time.
Oh, cool.
So I had, there's certain impulses that I had very, very young. And I really wanted to be a cartoonist. I mean, that was my comic books were my obsession. And
Really?
Dick Tracy was specifically my obsession. But what happened was in the late 50s, very early 60s, there was a craze. First there were Western TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, there were a couple hundred Western TV shows and only 3 networks. I mean, it's crazy. And so the follow-up was a Private Eye fad. Peter Gunn, 77 Sunset Strip, Perry Mason, all those shows. I loved those, and I got interested in the source material. I don't know if you're like this, but even from a very young childhood, if I'd see a movie, it was based on a book, I'd have to go see the book, get the book.
Yeah.
Or if it was based on history, I'd have to go read about the history. And so when these Private Eye shows came on, and a lot of them were based on, The Thin Man was based on Dashiell Hammett. There's a Philip Marlowe show that was, of course, based on Chandler.
Right.
So I started reading the books, and I got very, very caught up in the Private Eye fiction of Mickey Spillane, Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Richard S. Prather, a ton of those writers, and that the art cartooning kind of went off to one side then.
So let me ask you something. It's sort of an interesting dichotomy. So, you have a musical background,
right?
And rock and roll too, and even some stage experience. So there's theatricality in both.
Yeah.
But the Private Eye genre is sort of it's almost an internal theatricality, right? It's a lot of shadow. It's a lot of subdued.
Absolutely.
It's subdued. There's there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of danger and repression that simmers beneath.
Definitely.
So rather than being big out here, it's sort of big in here.
That's very well put. I think that's probably what attracted me to Mickey Spillane, because Mike Hammer was and is a character that has a lot of emotion. Some of the detectives, if you go back to Holmes or even just Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe, they're fairly self-contained. Perry Mason, we won't talk about the current version, but the real Perry Mason was a very self-contained person and was not anybody who was having a lot of emotional difficulties. Mike Hammer is a guy who the story begins with one of his best friends getting murdered, and he's really upset.
Yeah.
And he's really upset through the whole book. And if you're a bad guy, he's really upset with you. Yeah. And then that, because I'm 12, 13 reading this stuff, then there were girls, there was sex, there was violence, and I've always been attracted to that. And I've gotten some criticism, over the years I get criticism for this,
Yeah, for sure.
Teachers wouldn't be wild about the fact that I was writing what was called Blood and Thunder. And I even called the book Blood and Thunder just to get back on it.
I love it.
But I think people have to understand when they look at crime fiction, and detective fiction, mystery fiction. Yes, they're about sex and violence, but sex is life, violence is death.
Right.
Those are the two big topics.
Right.
And then if it's a crime story, it's got a conflict in it, doesn't it? Or it's built in. And real stories, a genuine story has a conflict at its heart. So I think I had good instincts. So I've never apologized for going down the road of crime and mystery.
I'm glad you said that, because well, we'll get to it later, but I dabble in two worlds pretty much. It's sci-fi and fantasy, and mystery, and the two audiences don't always overlap. There are sort of very definitive lines where the mystery readers, the crime readers, are more open to the more overt the violence and the sexual content, but the sci-fi fantasy readers are a lot less. They're more a little, I don't know if timid is the right word exactly, but they're more sensitive to it. But anyway, so you've written. Oh, go ahead.
I want to ask. I'll tell you, if you're on some of these Facebook groups that are about paperback covers, I'm fascinated by the fact that you've got the science fiction people and the mystery suspense people and sometimes men's adventure in the same sort of little hobby group.
Right.
So you have the mystery covers are all naked women and men with guns,
right.
Or naked women, a naked woman and a man with a gun, and then you come to the science fiction covers and they're all very kind of sedate or arty, and they're you can't even tell what the picture is, and it's hilarious, the difference in this primal version over here and this intellectual version.
I think that's maybe the word I was missing is primal. I think you're right.
Oh,
yeah, for sure. So speaking of which, so you've written and edited across various mediums, and we've touched upon some of them. You've done graphic novels, short stories, essays, even video games. Do you prefer one medium to another?
That's a really good question, because what I sometimes get asked is, when I have an idea, do I think about which of these forms is ideal for that? But I don't. I think about where can I market it, because I've managed to avoid real work
Not good for you.
my entire life, and I've managed to get paid for basically doing my hobbies for my entire life. So something like Road to Perdition is a graphic novel because an editor came to me and said, we'd like to have you develop a noir graphic novel for us. And I said, well, what about this? I mean, it could have been a prose novel. And in fact, I did prose sequels to it.
Right.
So I have found during the time I grew up and moved through my career, you had to be able to, whatever they asked you to do,
you did it.
You had to do it, and you had to know how to do it. And I think one skill I have is the ability to look at a form and analyze it and understand the difference between a novel and a film script. Usually different. Lots of novelists aren't too good at film scripts. Lots of screenwriters don't know what to do in the novel because there's major differences just in the way you think about it. And so dodging your question a little bit, I would say, I'll come back to it and say probably the novel is the thing I'm the most comfortable with. It may simply be, I love doing movies. I love writing movie scripts. I directed 4 indie films and 2 feature-length documentaries. So it's something I like to do. But getting things funded, and I'm in Muscatine, Iowa. I'm not in the middle of things, and so maybe that would have been just as rewarding to me in every sense of the word if I lived in LA or something. Whereas with a novel, I can sit here in Muscatine, Iowa, and and also nobody really bothers me. When you write a film script, you have so many hands in it.
All right. So you mentioned Road to Perdition, and I've been waiting to talk about this all day. So as I mentioned offline, so I just reread Road to Perdition, which I've read several times, and I just rewatched the movie, and I watched the deleted scenes and all the pieces. It's pretty faithful overall. They made some
Yeah.
changes. But it's a terrific movie with, I mean, and talk about a Hall of Fame cast of characters and people, Sam Mendes directing, Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Daniel Craig before he was James Bond. So just talk to me. How did this become that?
Well, it's always to a certain degree serendipity because we sent the book. I didn't. My agent sent it to a guy named Dean Zanuck, who's the son whose father was Richard Zanuck. And he read that and he thought, wow, the father and son element of this is something that my dad and I could relate to. And then he also thought, and I bet Steven Spielberg, who likes that kind of thing, would be interested in. What happened was he sent the book, like FedExed it to, I don't know, somewhere Tunisia or someplace where Richard Zanuck was shooting. And he read it and he loved it. And he sent it to Spielberg overnight, wherever Spielberg was. And then Spielberg read it and loved it and sent it to Tom Hanks. So that all happened in about a week.
Wow.
Unbeknownst to me. And a thing that happened that was pretty interesting is that my agent would call me and say, who's the biggest movie star in the world? And I'd say, oh, I don't know, Bruce Willis. He said, wrong, Tom Hanks. He's going to play Michael Sullivan in Road to Perdition. What? You know, and then over the course of about 2 weeks, I kept getting these bizarre phone calls that just seemed like I was being pranked. Because the next one was, and now they've got Paul Newman, you know. Well, now, okay. Well, now they've got Jude Law. Oh, well, now Mendes, who just got the Academy Award for American Beauty, this is going to be his second movie. And then they start. Then it's people like it's people like the cinematographer who's very famous.
Right.
It was just crazy. And one of the reasons why it came together so quickly, which isn't typical in Hollywood at all, is that there was a pending writer's strike.
Right, they had to get it done.
And they needed a good big project to do by a date. So instead of sitting around and taking pointless meetings like they mostly do, they said, we better get off our asses and make some decisions. And so I didn't tell anybody because I've had everybody, you know this, everybody who's a creative person has a ton of things fall through.
Sure.
And it's just heartbreaking. And early on, you tell people about it, and then all you hear about is, well, what happened to this?
Right,
well, what happened to that? And
That's
so
the
my parents were terrible about that. And because they spread all the good news that was actually they didn't understand what an option was. So we did not tell my dad and my mom until we had been on set.
Oh, wow.
Seriously. And when we were on set and I saw them shooting and I'm standing this close to Paul Newman, I turned to my wife, I said, I think we'll tell Dad now.
Oh, wow. So hold on. So did you, I mean, so they invited you to come on set. I mean, did they actually ask you for like, hey, you know, you're the writer. Did they want your input in any way or?
Yes, I was only on set one day, but it was a full long day and we had a great time. And we got to go to 3 different premieres, including one in London, which was really great.
Wow.
So I met all these people, got to know them a little bit. It was very exciting. And the process, my inclusion in the process was being sent drafts of the script that I could then, you know, give my notes to. And you know, I pretty much stayed out of their way because as a filmmaker myself, to some degree, I'm not a big deal filmmaker, that's for sure. But I know what you have to do as a filmmaker, and I know you have to do it your way, and you have to find the story in the script and in the material. And so I limited myself to basically things like, well, this dialogue is anachronistic.
Right.
I would advise you to change this because that word would not have been.
How did you feel about, you know, they brought in the Jude Law character, which does not exist in the paperback. How did you feel about that? I mean, I think it worked really well in the movie.
No, I liked it. Here's the thing about that. The Road to Perdition was originally conceived to be 3 graphic novellas that would be collected as a book. It was done for Paradox Press, I believe, is the name of this part of DC Comics. And what happened was, my artist was wonderful, Richard Piers Rayner, but he was kind of slow. So we were the first signed and the last to get the material in. And we gave them time basically to fail with the graphic novel, with the Noir graphic novel program. And it almost didn't get published.
Oh, wow.
And I knew Paul Levitz a little bit, the publisher there. And I said, Paul, this is the best work I've ever done. Can you please get this out?
Right.
Please, please, please.
Oh.
And so they put it out without putting it out as three pieces. Okay. They put it out in one. But if you read it, it's very much, there's a part one, a part two, and a part three.
Yep.
And through part one, part two, part three, they are, the father and son are tracked by various contract killers.
Right. So they just sort of distilled that into one.
They distilled it. And I think it was very smart.
Yeah, it worked. All right, Max, we could keep going, but we got lots to talk about. So you're a man who lives on deadline. So what are you doing? Tell me about Wolfpack.
Wolfpack is a very interesting company, and they're really thriving right now because they're what you call a hybrid company. They are primarily ebook, and then they publish essentially print on demand physical books. Of course, that's the opposite of what I'm kind of used to. And it was kind of a jump to do this, but during COVID-19 in particular, with people going back to their Kindles, they've really blossomed. And they have a terrific editor there named Paul Bishop, who's very, very smart. And I've known Paul for years. And I said, I'd like to try something for you guys. And so we decided that I would do a couple of original novels for them, and they would take a bunch of my essentially backlist books that were not on ebook yet, included some collections, included some novels, and they have brought out about 8 or 9 of my books. And the very first one that will be a new book, a brand new novel, is a kind of a James Bond homage called Come Spy With Me, that I have done with my friend Matt Clemens. Matt Clemens is a writer who I've worked with for about 20 years. And we did all the CSI books together. We did all the Criminal Minds books together. We did the Dark Angel books. I've always done the movie tie-ins myself, but the TV tie-ins, we were on a pretty hard schedule. We were doing 3 or 4 of those CSIs a year for a while. Right. And so we did them together, and he does a great job. And I feel like we have a kind of a third style. I mean, it doesn't read like me and it doesn't read like him. You put it together, and there's a certain synergy about it. And then we also talk about the fact that together, jointly, we have like one relatively intelligent human.
There you go.
So that works too.
All right. Oh, great. Well, you got a lot of good stuff coming. But so quick interlude for folks who came in a little bit late. If you have any questions or comments for Max, send them in the chat box, and we'll get to them in a couple of minutes. All right. So it's time for the new segment of our special segment of the show where we spin the wheel. All right. We have an actual game spinner. All right. So the categories are Music to My Ears, Quantum Leap, Stranger in a Strange Land, Fear of Flying, Play It Again, Sam, Trick or Treat, or Cold Case. We're going to spin the wheel, and what you get is what you play. You ready?
Elvis Costello used to do this in concert. Did you know that? He'd spin the wheel, and that's what they'd play.
All right. Well, all right. See,
very cool.
Going back to my, and by the way, just as an interlude, so my uncle, so I'm a drummer, and my uncle, my dad's brother, is also a drummer, and he used to be in the music business. And he was in the music recording business in the 60s and the 70s. And Elvis Costello was one of the acts he used to be. He did Elvis Costello, Fleetwood Mac, Jackson Brown. Yeah, so I grew up, in the 70s, and I'll tell this one quick story. He told my dad this, it was around 1970. He said, there's this new guy coming out. You've never heard of him. He's got a song coming out. It's going to blow your mind. And this guy is going to be the biggest star in the world. The song was Crocodile Rock by Elton John in 1970.
What happened to that guy?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he did something. So, all right. You ready to play? All right.
I am.
All right. What do we got? All right, and you got Cold Case. All right, this was a special set. This is a special one I did just for you. All right, there have been countless unsolved crimes throughout history. If you could get the answer to just one, which one would it be?
Well, here's the problem. In my Nathan Heller series that I've been doing since the early 80s, every one is about one of those cases, and I pretty much solved them all. So at
Okay.
least in my mind I have, but my favorite, which is one of the subjects of the Nathan Heller books, is JFK. That happened when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And it is the, I hate kind of what's been going on in recent years, because I think all these BS conspiracies have given the real conspiracies a bad name.
Yeah.
And so I did a book called Ask Not. Also, well, a book called Target Lancer, and then the follow-up was Ask Not, and those are my Kennedy. And I can't tell you who did it because you've got to read the books, and I need the royalties. So
fair enough. All right. So who killed Kennedy? All right. Thanks, Max. So you and I are both in the writing business. So let's go to our advice column. What's the best and worst writing advice someone ever gave you or advice you overheard?
Well, I can't really think about, I don't know if I could give you a bad one. Mickey Spillane gave me a funny one, which was, I said, do you have any writing advice for me, Mickey? And he said, yeah, take your wallet out of your pocket before you sit down to write. And I said, but Mickey, your wallet's a lot fatter than my wallet. But I think having an attitude that it is a job, and to get the craft down, so that, because to be able to do this over the years, I couldn't just wait for the muse to come in. A plumber doesn't wait for the muse. A doctor doesn't wait for the muse. I mean, so I view it as work. They say, where do you get your inspiration? And I say, well, first of the month when the bills come.
Yeah.
So that would be the other thing I would say is, you have to, even though you're writing science fiction or you're writing mystery fiction, which is melodrama, I mean, it's a step up from reality, you still got to write from your own life. You still have to write from your experience. And I think the fact that, because I'm a little bit of a stay-at-home person, a little bit of a hermit who, when COVID came along, it's like, well, now I have an excuse to shelter in place. I mean, it's just, but because I played in the band all those years, that got me out among the people, among oddball people sometimes. Musicians are not necessarily the most normal human beings. Club owners are not necessarily the most normal human beings. Your audiences are made up of, we had a family that was a rough, almost criminal family, like something out of Justified, who loved my band Cruisin', and they loved us. And it was fabulous to be loved by these horrible people. And because you could safely kind of interact with them, like, well, what'd you do last week? And then you might hear something pretty interesting.
All right, so we've got a few minutes, so we'll take some questions from the audience. So this one for you, Max. What's the difference between writing your own original creation and writing the stories with someone else's characters and world?
Well, I have been lucky with my camera, particularly because it was a childhood, essentially, love of mine. They were like vitamins I took as a kid. So I have a very proprietary feeling about that. The same was true with Dick Tracy. But there also are instances where let's take the movie novels in particular, because I did a lot of movie novels. I was pretty lucky because I got some incredibly important things like Saving Private Ryan, Air Force One, very famous things. But what I would always do when I got one of these scripts, because you get a script, they don't send you the movie's being shot. You see this, you work from a script. If it was something that I didn't immediately relate to, I looked to find kind of a window into the material. A good example would be, I had done the Mummy novels. I had done the Mummy and I'd done two of them, and then they did the Scorpion King. And I had to figure out, and I didn't really have a lot of my personal experience in that, But when I read the material, I thought, well, this is kind of like an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel. So maybe I can write this, and it's sort of sword and sorcery. So maybe this could be my sword and sorcery novel. So you find a window into it that taps into your enthusiasm. Because trust me, if for you to have, you have to write a book that you would read.
Right. So that's a great way to say it. I like that. You got to write a book that you would read. That's good. That's it. All right. So John, got another one for you, Max. How far into the 20th century will you be able to take Nate Heller?
I hope to take him up through Watergate. So that would probably be it. I've wrestled a little bit too with. I've looked at a couple that I've looked at but haven't decided on yet are the Zodiac and also Martin Luther King. I'm preparing to do Bobby Kennedy, and there's going to be 2 Bobby Kennedy books, and one of them's going to be set earlier that will have to do with the Jimmy Hoffa years, and there's also an incredible kidnap case that is part of that, and then I'm going to do the assassination of Kennedy as well, Robert Kennedy as well.
Wow.
So those 2 are pretty much for sure if I can stay on the planet long enough to do them.
All right. Well, make sure you stick around.
All right.
And one that we got any new Quarry novels in the queue?
I'm going to do a Quarry novel called Quarry's Blood, and the meaning of the title is very interesting, but you have to read the book to find out. I haven't written it yet, but I'm thinking of having there be a bit of a setting in the horror world, where maybe somebody wants to kill a Stephen King like novelist. Maybe there's a horror con that we go to, because I'd like to do some of that imagery, because horror is something I'm interested in as well.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for asking.
So Max, this has been a great conversation. I could go all night, but life goes on. So we talked about a bunch of new books you got coming out. Where can folks get them, and what are you most excited about now?
Well, I should have held up Myrtleized, which is the short story collection that gathers all of my stories that I've done with Matt Clemens, who I mentioned, who's my co-author of the forthcoming Come Spy With Me. Myrtleized, the opening short story is Mo Howard as a amateur detective. That's, and if you look carefully, you can see there's on the cover, he's got this silhouette has the Mo Howard haircut. This is from Wolfpack, and you get that at Amazon. They also have brought the Elliot Ness novels back out. There's 4 of those.
All right.
Got a lot of them. I'm going to hold a couple things up. This is the new Nathan Heller, Do No Harm, which is about the Sam Shepard murder case that inspired The Fugitive. Of course, there's Mike Hammer, Masquerade for Murder. And then this is very serious, because this is nonfiction. People wanted to see what the real truth was behind Elliot Ness. And so this is the second of the nonfiction books about Elliot Ness. This is Elliot Ness and the Mad Butcher, written with A. Brad Schwartz, who is a Princeton scholar and a good writer, excellent writer, and a great researcher. So that's what's keeping the lights on around this joint right now.
All right. Thanks, Max, for a great show. And
Russ, thank you so much.
Oh, no, this was fantastic. And I want to thank everyone who's watching. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro. And if you're watching here, then you are a fan of crime, noir, murder, and private eye. So, Murder in Montague Falls is a collection of 3 novellas written by Sawney Hatton, Patrick Thomas, and yours truly. The novellas all feature teen protagonists and are set in the same fictional town across 3 decades. And hot off the press is my new novel, Crackle and Fire, featuring my hard-boiled intergalactic private eye, Angela Hardwick, who is hired to find a missing intern with stolen corporate files, but soon finds herself tackling with dueling gangsters, angry protesters, and a madman from Earth with galactic ambitions of his own. Crackle and Fire and Murder in Montague Falls are available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. Thanks, everyone, for a great show. Thank you, Max, and I'll see everyone next week. All right, take care, guys.